Thank you for joining Pioneer. I'm Chris with Norman Public Library Central, and this is the next video in our series on the Swift computer programming language. In our last video, we looked at optionals. A constructor like URL might fail and give us a response that indicated that the URL was invalid. We learned about the guard let statement that allowed us to create a non-optional variable, in our case points URL, which bypassed the optional nature of the constructor by providing an else branch that the code could run if the optional construction failed. Ours detected the failure and printed out that it wasn't a URL and then returned from our function. All guard statements must exit the program flow. In this case, it must return. You can see in my code, I've also added a question mark after the try statement, which makes this result in an optional and allows me to use the guard let statement for my response as well. Your challenge was to apply the optional idea to your own code and add guard statements protecting your own code against failures. Here's my example. You can download this code from this URL. In my case, my grid location is 9982 and my weather office is OUN, which I apply into a weather string, and I then validate by calling guard let weather URL equals URL. This ensures that if I have created an invalid URL, for example by putting a %sign, that this code will fail and print out a logical error message. I've also added a guard around my weather response in case the National Weather Service's server fails to give me information, or if I've mistyped the URL above. That's the question mark after my try statement. Did you get yours working? I hope so. Now let's move on to talk about dealing with this try statement in more detail. The try goes with the throws that we've seen earlier, and both relate to what are called exceptions and exception handling in Swift. Let's have a look. You can download this code from Pioneer Library System's website at lesson13-exceptions.swift. Remember to take the name of the function and put it into your main.swift so that it runs. We'll begin with the following code. Function, lesson 13 exceptions, which throws. Then on line 37, I currently have the code guard let points response equals try question mark string. This string statement is attempting to fetch data off of the internet. Of course, we all know that the internet works 100% of the time, so this is never a big deal. Okay, maybe that's not true. In fact, internet calls fail all the time, so what we'd like is a way of detecting that failure and printing out a more logical error message. Right now, I am handling this using a try question mark. That is, by marking the results of this optional, I can use my guard statement. However, there is another way of handling an exception. I'm going to delete the guard statement, and I'm going to delete the question mark after the word try. I'm also going to delete my entire else branch. Instead, I'm going to handle this exception using a do catch statement. So before my let statement, I'll type the word do and an open curly brace. Then I'll indent let points response equals try. And on the following line, I'll put a closed curly brace and the word catch and an open curly brace. This is called a do catch statement. Any line of code in between the two curly braces that define my do statement, which throws an exception, that is, lines where the try statement indicates to me that that might fail, will bypass the rest of the code inside those curly braces and skip immediately to the code in between my curly braces. In this case, I can print out an error message. And the error message I'm going to print out comes from Swift's internal error variable, which it creates for me inside a catch statement. I'm going to print out error dot localized description. Localized description means that if I'm running my program and my computer is set to English, the language of the error will be in English, but if my computer is set to Spanish, then it will print out the error in Spanish. And if the computer is in Mandarin, then it will print the error in Mandarin, and if the computer is in Klingon, it will print out the error in Klingon. No, not really. If this gave me an error, there's no point in continuing through this function, so I'll also tell it to return here, although unlike in the case of the guard statement, the return statement is optional in this case. You could write perfectly valid code after this line. However, we've introduced another error into our code by leaving the print statement on line 44. My error is now use of unresolved identifier points response. This is occurring because points response is defined inside the curly braces of my do catch statement. Variables that you create inside curly braces are only valid inside those curly braces. The curly braces create what's called a scope. Points response exists in between lines 37 and 39, but as soon as the curly brace on line 39 is reached, points response no longer exists. In order for this code to work, I need to take my print statement and I need to move it into my curly braces. Now, when I run my code, if my URL fails, for example, because I've misspelled gov, Swift continues to print out the first part of the error statement, the errors that occur inside my creation of the string. However, the final error message is my error message, that it couldn't open some sort of file because, well, there is no file. One of the main features of exceptions is that they allow you to choose whether or not to handle the error at the point it occurs, or whether it makes more sense for outside code to handle your exception. It would also be perfectly valid for us to not have a do catch statement at all, like this. In this case, the try statement indicates to me that this call might fail, but if I fail to handle that failure by putting it in my own do catch statement, the throws statement in my function definition tells me that it is possible that my own function may allow that exception to propagate out. That is, the exception could instead be handled in my main function. In some code, it simply makes more sense to handle the errors outside the region where they occur directly because you have more information or can present a better error message to the user. Your challenge is to add exception handling to your code from yesterday. So, continue to get the weather forecast, but this time, instead of using an optional to detect the failure of the try statement, use a do catch statement. Good luck.